Welcome to this month's Pets Up Together Academy session in partnership with SPIVs. Today we've got the awesome Angela Jones and Emma Pemberthy. I hope I've said that, Em, because I only know you as M Pem. That's the only way that I refers to you as. You'll notice that there's a slightly different format this time round. We're trialing Google rather than Zoom. There's been a few little tweaks. Hopefully this time round I've been able to make everybody contributors. So if you've got any questions, you should be able to jot them into the chat, but you will be off mic. So it will just be over to Em and Angela for today's session. I'm going to come off camera, but I will be in the background helping field any questions that come through. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming on. Really appreciate it. It's over to you.
Oh, thanks so much, Naomi. We're really pleased that so many of you could come. No pressure or anything. So as Naomi said, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks Pets Up for having us in conjunction with SPIVs. We feel really honoured to be here. And yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about prescriptions, pets prescriptions and purpose this evening. So a little bit about what we're going to chat about who MPEM, or Emma Pemberthy, as she's formerly known, and I are, about the written prescriptions, about the process, the stakeholders in the system, where we are now, how the CMA investigation might mix that up a little bit, and what we see as what ways we see that we could mitigate the impact on practical vets. So a little bit about me. My name is Angela. I'm a vet, I'm a mum, and I'm the co-founder of PetScribers. So Emma and I graduated from Bristol Vet School in 2009, and I've been in equine practice ever since. So I sit on Beaver Council. I also contribute to Horse and Hound regularly, but after the birth of my second child, who incidentally was born in the front seat of a moving car, I felt that traditional equine practice wasn't offering me the professional fulfillment that I needed. And so I started working for Equipool on a part-time basis, helping me balance my family life with PetScribers. So now over to Emma.
Hi everyone, I'm Emma Pemberthy. I am a small animal vet and the other co-founder of PetScribers. So I came to veterinary medicine through a slightly more tortuous route than Ange. So I initially studied natural sciences at Cambridge before going into investment banking in 2008, just as the financial crisis hit actually. It was a really interesting experience, but ultimately just not fulfilling enough. So I took voluntary redundancy and decided to work longer hours for less pay as a vet. I then qualified in 2015 from Nottingham, top of my class, and worked in the small animal department of a large independent mixed practice in the Cotswolds. I actually spent my first year working every other weekend and doing an awful lot of night shifts before transitioning to a much more sociable 1 in 10 out of hour schedule. I met Ange at work, and we often chatted in the office after hours as we were mopping up all our end of day jobs, and we bonded over a deep love of cardiology and a real dislike of the administrative burden of the whole written prescription process. And we actually started discussing PetScribers back in 2021. And after increasingly witnessing more issues with the written prescribing process, we thought it was really now or never. And we started fully working on PetScribers in 2024. And my cat has now decided to join the party. So apologies for that. I will mute.
So pets are family. 57% of UK households own a pet. In the UK, there's 23 million dogs and cats, 1.5 million rabbits, 850,000 horses, and pets are living longer than ever. So increasingly, they're humanized, and veterinary medicine means that, and new medications mean that they're living much longer, and they're now available on the veterinary market. After a surge in pet ownership during COVID, we now have an aging population of pets that require ongoing treatment for potentially chronic conditions. So a little bit of history. In 2005, the CMA, then called the Competition Commission Order, investigated the veterinary sector for the first time. This focused on supply chain and the supply specifically of prescription-only medications. One of the findings in the report was that the veterinary profession tended to understate the true cost of their professional services, something which I still think we're probably guilty of now, and they offset that in medication prices. This led to the supply of veterinary medicinal products order in 2005. This stopped suppliers giving preferential prices to pharmacies and prohibited vets from charging for written prescriptions until 2008. And it really was this that was the rise of the online pharmacy. And Pam?
I've muted myself because of the cat, sorry. So fast forward to 2025. So the CMA is once again investigating the veterinary sector, and their concerns this time sort of spanned four main areas. The first one was consumer information and choice. They're really concerned that owners are not being presented with all the information they need in order to make the best choice for them and their pet. And this really includes things like options available to them in terms of treatment and referral providers, information relating to pricing, information regarding the potential outcomes of different treatment options, and awareness regarding ownership links for other service providers. So, for instance, if your veterinary practice also owns the referral centre that you're being sent on to, or the crematoria that you're being referred to as an owner. And then the second area was the potential for business owners and managers who aren't vets and therefore not regulated as we are as professionals to influence how things are being presented and offered to owners. And that includes things like smoke screens on practice ownership and potential vertical integration chains that are limiting owner choice and therefore competition in the sector. Then their third area of concern was on medication pricing. So they felt that medication pricing was opaque and online purchasing was being poorly promoted, so that owners were unaware about the relative savings available to them buying their medication online. And then the last sort of area was the out-of-date regulatory framework. And I think on this one, we can probably all safely agree that the Veterinary Surgeons Act is long overdue an overhaul. So we're going to focus there on the most recent remedies. So sort of on the paper they released on the 1st of May, there were four main remedies around medication that were being proposed. The first was that prescriptions should become mandatory in all cases, subject to limited exceptions. They were still trying to work out exactly what they meant by limited exceptions, but it looks like things like injections, acute point of care medication, and obviously large bottles of opiates were all going to be under the limited exceptions, because nobody wants to hand over a big bottle of morphine to anyone. And then the second one was about potential caps on prescription and dispensing fees. And the idea of that was essentially to reduce the barriers to buying online. Now, interestingly, in the CMA survey, they found that only about 2% of owners were actually dissuaded from buying medication online by prescription fees. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that one. The third area was about transparent medicine pricing, which meant essentially informing owners of potential savings. And that means either in writing, letting them know what the saving is if they went online, or through the use of something like a price comparison portal. And then the last area on medicines in particular was encouraging generic prescribing, which is something that happens pretty much regularly in the human medicine industry. So most GPs now will prescribe generics, but the idea was to increase inter-brand competition and enable owners essentially to easily compare equivalent brands and prevent well-known brands or own branded products from cornering the market through sheer owner naivety.
So MPEM and I have spent an awful lot of time chatting to various people within the industry about the written prescription process. And it's a really complex situation. So there's 36 million owners in the UK, around 30,000 vets, 19 online pharmacies, 86 pet insurers, 20 pharmaceutical companies, and one governing body. And there's very little crosstalk between all of them, and so they're quite fragmented, and it's a very disunited market. So unlike the NHS, where there's one body that governs all things, the veterinary equivalent is very, very fragmented. So what we plan on doing this evening is walking you through our experience with these stakeholders in the process, based on the conversations that we've had, and why we embarked on this journey in the first place to build PetScribers. And hopefully we'll have a healthy discussion at the end.
Right, so the first stakeholder we considered was the owner. So in the AVMA's latest survey, they said it pretty plainly, you know, price is now the #1 barrier to care. And actually 52% of pet owners skipped or declined veterinary services last year because they simply couldn't afford it. And the cost of living crisis has made pet ownership significantly more financially challenging for many, despite the fact medication can be purchased online at a fraction of the cost paid for in a veterinary clinic. Only 1 in 7 owners are regularly doing so. And the reason for that is that they face barriers to doing so. So for 50% of owners, the timescales and the hassles involved in buying online means it's often perceived as inconvenient. 38% of owners still don't know that they can buy their medication online if they wanted to. 36% are worried that the medication they buy online won't be safe or authentic, which puts them off doing it. And 14% are actually afraid to ask their vet for a prescription because they're worried about how it's going to be perceived and how their vet will feel when they ask for a prescription. Now, in terms of vets, as veterinary professionals, Ange and I found prescription writing time-consuming and pretty laborious. I found I was often creating prescriptions in my non-existent admin time, which we all know always gets taken emergencies, or that extra that just gets slotted into the diary, or an hour-long conversation with an anxious pet owner. But it does vanish. Like, admin time truly vanishes. I don't know where it goes. It's like a black hole. And at the practice I worked at, we had a 48-hour turnaround time, which I always felt seemed pretty reasonable. But the written prescriptions would often get left until that turnaround time was almost up and someone shoved it under the vet's nose and then made it a priority. So they were almost always avoided or left in our repeat prescription book. Nobody ever wanted to do them. And it was certainly never feasible to generate it during an appointment, which owners would often ask for. And there were also frequently owners who came in needing the prescription done today because they hadn't left enough time to order more, to give them enough of a window to order online, which usually then meant having to lose what little was left lunch break or having to stay late to get it done. Either that, or if it just couldn't be done that day, the owner would have to bridge the gap, so buying medication from practice, and then they would often invariably angrily claim that this had wiped out the savings from buying online. And comparatively was on a yard, which meant time was less of a pressure for her, but she didn't have the means to generate a prescription while she was on site. So she would have to ring the office, ask them to generate a prescription, and then wait until she could get to the office to sign the prescription, which again, often introduced a 48-hour time lag into the process. So as a vet, the process is frustrating. And then written prescriptions are also prone to human errors. Human error rate in data is about 1% as a quoted stat. So getting a prescription returned to you for editing just adds further to your workload. And there is then the pressure to get it remedied ASAP, not to mention now having to deal with a frustrated owner as part of the process, which, let's face it, nobody wants to be doing if they can avoid it. Next up, online pharmacies. So the online pharmacies, certainly from our experience, are a real mixture. So there's some completely independent, some private equity-owned pharmacies, so owned by the large veterinary groups. And then you've got the corporates that are owned by larger human pharmacies. So, for instance, Vet Pharmacy is part of Chemist to You, and Farm Petco has recently been bought by a human pharmacy as well. So their problems, the independents, often centered around, well, actually all of them, the problem centered around exposure. So as we mentioned previously, 38% of owners still don't know they can buy online. And certainly for some of the smaller pharmacies, they struggle to compete with the marketing and the SEO budgets of the larger corporate entities. So these independent pharmacies were often set up for veterinary practices to provide medication to their own clients, often at a slightly larger discount. And they had little intention of taking over the world, but they are often able to compete with the LVGs on price, and a platform that increased their visibility would help increase their market share. Now, in terms of their pain points, incorrect or fraudulent scripts also cost them time and money. So when an internet pharmacy receives an incorrect script, they will need to follow it up with the vet and check the authenticity. Any concerns over fraud then need to be referred to the VMD, adding more workload and operational inefficiencies to their business. Due to their fragmented nature, they also have no idea if another pharmacy has potentially already fulfilled the prescription, as there's no centralized database, and as Ange mentioned, there's no crosstalk between them. They all just operate in their own little silos. And then lastly, the variation in scripts also reduces their operational efficiency. So they're handling prescriptions from multiple different vet practices, which may all have slightly different layouts, slightly different templates. And this makes it really hard for them to get their eye in and rapidly decipher exactly what it is they're meant to be dispensing and for whom. So that just slows them down. And lastly, the process is still highly manual. So pharmacies need to keep track of what orders they're fulfilling. So many of them have essentially a PMS that they use to create customer and animal accounts to ensure traceability of the prescriptions. And some of these pharmacies, therefore, do actually employ multiple people to scan in the prescriptions that they are fulfilling, something that feels incredibly archaic and environmentally unfriendly in an increasingly digital era. I hope everyone's enjoying the sound of my voice because I'm still going. Insurance.
I know, and I feel terrible about it.
No. I'm still going. I'm on a roll. So, on to insurance. So approximately one in 4 pets is insured in the UK. Last year, the Association of British Insurers literally released their figures about 3 days ago, but the pet insurance payouts last year topped £1.23 billion, and that's across 1.8 million claims. And amazingly, this has risen a whopping 103% over the past 10 years. And the rise last year was 4%, and the year before that was actually 32%. So, a lot of these rises are front loaded, they're more recent. And an estimated 17% of insurance claim values are due to medication. So for them, this represents quite a significant proportion of what they're paying out and what owners are therefore covering, because owners invariably have to cover 10 to 20% of the total bill. But actually, one of the biggest concerns we heard from insurers was that annual limits on policies are being reached early. So owners are maxing out their insurance policies, and then everything else they are having to pay for themselves. So this is potentially either leaving owners without cover for the tail end of their policy year. So some pets may potentially be going without life-changing medication, or pet owners are having to turn to other means of covering the costs of their pet's care until their insurance renews and kicks in again. Number 5, we're almost there. Stakeholder 5 is the pharmaceutical companies. So when we spoke to them, we found that they spend millions of pounds shutting down sites that sell counterfeit medication. So an estimated 1 in 10 owners have bought counterfeit medication online. And that stat was from a study that was done back in 2020. Now, I don't think anyone has done any further research since. I certainly couldn't find any myself, but I suspect that if anything, the situation has only got worse since then. So these pharma companies are spending millions of pounds trying to shut down these sites every year. And as many of you know, a good example of this was actually the situation involving YouMove in November last year. So more than 1 dog died and several were seriously ill after a third-party seller on Amazon was reported to have been selling counterfeit YouMove. So during our initial research into building Petscribers, Ange and I went on a bit of a hunt around the websites to see what we could find online. And actually we found medication for sale on Facebook Marketplace, on Gumtree, and we even found Baytril being sold on Etsy, which aside from being a POM-V is actually a designated critically important antibiotic in human medicine, so doubly shocking. And once the brand damage has been done with these counterfeit medications, it's notoriously difficult to undo. With the rise of social media, it's becoming increasingly easy for someone who bought counterfeit medication, which at best is going to be ineffective, at worst potentially dangerous or even fatal, as we saw with the YouMove issue, that can do untold brand damage without actual fair cause. So it's therefore desirable for the pharmaceutical companies and indeed vets as safeguarders of animal welfare that owners are being directed towards reputable sites for purchasing their medication. Now, lastly, and perhaps most interestingly for pharma, is the struggle of pharma to access end user data. And what this means is that they know how their medications perform in tightly controlled clinical trials. What they often do not know is how that medication has performed in, say, Fluffy, the 5-kilogram overweight chihuahua that does barely any exercise, or has it worked when it was given off license to an animal that also had kidney disease because there were no other options for that pet? And in terms of problems, they're completely reliant on the yellow suspect adverse reaction forms being filled out. But how often do vets actually fill these out? Especially when the problem is not so much, oh my goodness, this dog had a horrendous reaction or this cat suffered, horrendous side effects, but ineffectiveness. How often do we go and fill out that yellow form just because a medication did not work in a given pet? And I can safely say I probably didn't do it anywhere near as much as I should have done. But pharmaceutical companies don't know their products maybe aren't working for a subset of the general pet population if they aren't getting that information. So if pharma can access that pet data related to how these drugs are performing in the general population, it could be utilized to improve the outcomes for pets, keep the SPCs more relevant and up to date, refine medications, and ultimately drive more innovation in the pet medication space. Last one, I promise, guys. So the VMD. So the VMD has a regulatory role specifically regarding the oversight of online sales and medicine safety. However, many owners have never even heard of the VMD and have no idea of how to check that the website they're about to purchase medication from is actually legitimate. When we interviewed pet owners, not a single one of them knew who the VMD was or what they did. They also had no clue to look for the blue badge or anything to do with legitimacy. Many just relied on being recommended a pharmacy from word of mouth from another friend or another pet owner. Now, in terms of the VMD's involvement in the prescription writing process, prescription fraud is probably their most pressing issue. Fraud is increasing year on year. And in 2019, there were 200 cases reported, but over 800 cases reported by the end of 2022. And so essentially, it's been rising exponentially. And ultimately, we know that's going to be an issue because paper prescriptions can be altered. And now PDF editing software is readily available on mobiles. Owners are more than capable of being able to doctor prescriptions. And this has risks involved. Owners could be getting hold of significantly more medication than they need, and they could potentially be selling this on to owners who are not seeking veterinary advice before starting the medication. They may also end up using out-of-date medication or giving medication to a pet where it's no longer suitable or even actively contraindicated. Furthermore, the VMD is involved in the investigation of counterfeit medication. So as more owners look to buy online with an increasingly digitally native pet owning population, policing this is only going to get more onerous.
That was quite the marathon, Pam. I'm sorry, we seem to have divvied this up really, really unfairly, but I'll just do my bit now. So where is the system breaking down? So we know that pets are a highly emotive subject, and with the unprecedented response from the general public to the CMA investigation, and vets are getting unfairly bad press. We care deeply about our patients. So where is this getting lost in translation? So as Emma's already alluded to, as practicing vets, we witnessed owners struggling to afford the medication that they needed, and which we found really hard. They didn't know there was another way. So currently there's a lack of transparency in the system, which the CMA has also flagged. Professional fees are also subsidizing medication revenue. So people just don't know what they're paying for. So Em and I usually liken this to going into a supermarket and buying a bag of carrots for $5 and a bag of potatoes for £1, even though they'd cost a similar value. You don't mind what you're paying so much, but you just like to know what you're paying for. So when the owners subsequently search for that medication online and find it cheaper, they feel disgruntled because they don't understand why or how this medication can be offered at such different prices. They also don't understand the lead time. So currently, with it being usually a 48-hour wait for a prescription, they don't understand, it's only an option for ongoing medication. So they don't understand the process. So comms here are really, really keen on taking the owner on that journey with you, because they don't understand the process. They don't know that they need regular prescription checks. So when they call in 6 months for a repeat prescription and you say no, actually they're pretty cross about it. They don't understand the frequency of those regular checks, which depends on the practice and the type of medication. But I think as vets we should be possibly being a bit better at communicating that with our clients. But as vets, we just don't have the time in a consult to explain that to them. They don't understand that a pharmacy processing time will also be added on top of the veterinary processing time, and then leaving them with, as Em said, that bridging the gap process where they have to get medication from the veterinary practice in order to await the medication from the online pharmacy, possibly negating any savings that they might have made. The own brand prescribing means that owners don't know that there are other brands available with active ingredients that would do exactly the same thing. So Emma and I with heart medications recently did this for one of our beta testers, and we saved them an awful lot of money just by changing the brand. So not changing anything that you're prescribed in terms of the active ingredient, but just mixing up the brand. They're also scared of the process. They're scared of buying counterfeit medication, and they are scared of asking us for a prescription in the first place. So what can we do? I think we can rebuild trust with transparency. The number of prescriptions that vets are required to write is highly likely to increase, whether it becomes mandatory or not, with this digitally native population. So millennials and Gen Z, they want instantaneous answers, and they want them now. And reduced medication sales will inevitably impact practice revenue. But if we can reduce the time it takes to write a written prescription, and also reduce the human error in the process, we might mitigate the impact that reduced medication sale has on practice revenue. So we can decide what better looks like if we are ahead of the curve and ahead of the game and ahead of this CMA final report in November. So MPEM's already done a really great job of going through all of the stakeholders, but how will PetScribers help each of them? So for owners, where we've created an unbiased comparison software that will enable them to source safe, affordable medication only from V&D accredited retailers. We will provide them with notifications to reduce the mental load of managing really complex medication schedules, helping owner compliance. We'll also reduce the processing time on prescriptions with prescription writing software. And also it will give us, Pet Profiles will give us the ability to ask them, is Fluffy feeling better? Is Fluffy moving more? Is Fluffy sleeping less? Did Fluffy have any vomiting or diarrhea? And get that end user data that the pharmaceutical companies so long for. For vets, prescription writing software will save them precious time through auto-population of fields, automating dose calculations and reducing human error. So we could populate scripts instantaneously in a consult room. And this will in turn improve client trust. The professional said to me, do you know what? Actually, it would make much more sense for you to buy this online than getting it from me. I would inherently trust them forever. Because it just shows, it would really strengthen that sort of client-patient bond. For pharmacies, the standardized prescriptions will streamline their workflows, reducing the time it takes to process a prescription and also reducing fraud. For insurers, with 40% of ongoing claims being made up of medication, sourcing online would reduce claim sizes and help get a handle on these spiraling premiums. And for the pharmaceutical company, like we touched on, the valuable data insights would drive innovation, improve animal welfare, and reduce brand damage in the process. And we hope that PetScribers can create a centralized prescription database for people to cross-reference whether or not a prescription has been utilized previously to help combat fraud in our share of the market.
So this is what Ange and I have been working on for the past year. So we are about to launch our independent unbiased price comparison platform. Should really say service comparison platform, actually, because it does much more than price. We felt it was really important for it to do more than that. So we wanted owners who wish to buy their medication online to be able to do so easily and safely. And we wanted to support them through the process with the level of guidance and explanation that vets often struggle to find the time to do in a consult room. So owners on our site can find and compare pet medication, and they can sort of titrate it based on what matters most to them. So whether it's getting it cheaply, whether it's the speed of delivery, or whether it's supporting a small business. So we help owners make those decisions. And we specifically highlight the option to select the independence on the filter. We explain what this means and why it matters in more detail elsewhere on the site. But we know from speaking to owners that many of them want to support the independent practices. And that's actually reflected in the 21% of owners that actively consider whether a practice is corporate or independent before choosing their practice. And 68% of those people will choose an independent where they can. So, but it can be really difficult to find that information on a pharmacy's website. And interestingly, many of our beta users were particularly keen on supporting the independent pharmacies run by independent vets when they were enabled to do so. And then our development pipeline, as Ange alluded to, includes those personalised dashboards, allowing owners to more closely monitor their prescription medications, informing them when that check is due, when they need to order a repeat prescription, and helping them with notifications and reminders related to medication administration. And as Ange alluded to, we hope this will also encourage them to help us gather that end user data that can be utilised to improve drug safety and efficacy. And then our final step is to progress to that full e-prescribing platform. So developing the sort of intuitive prescription writing software we wish we had both had when we were in primary care. And our aim is to reduce that mental load for vets, reduce the administrative errors, and reduce the lead time for prescription generation. So making it something that could be done as part of a consult. And with e-prescribing, that also allows that seamless flow from vets to pharmacies. So owners would never see or handle their prescription. And the use of UUIDs, which stands for Universally Unique Identifiers, means that a prescription is uniquely identified. So it can't be utilised more than once, and allows you to create that centralised prescription database that Ange was talking about. So essentially our vision is a much more unified, cohesive ecosystem rather than the currently fragmented and disunited system. And that means that rather than written prescriptions potentially being a headache and a hindrance, effective use of them could actually help the industry as a whole function more effectively.
So our final thoughts, and to give Pam a little break, I think she's had to have a glass of wine. So as far as we see it, Comms are king. We need to communicate choices really clearly with owners, because miscommunication will only breed ill will. Owners want value, but what each owner values is really different. Some will be driven by cost, others by supporting independent businesses, and others need their drugs as quickly as possible. But irrespective of their motivation, what they want is transparency. They want to know what they're paying for. This will never replace the requirement for point of care sales. So the CMA's proposed remedies have raised lots of valid concerns, but more prescriptions could mean more work for already stretched teams, but that's only if nothing changes. We feel that with the right tech and workflow designs, increased prescribing doesn't have to equal increased burden on vets. And smart platforms could streamline the process, freeing up clinical time for vets to do what they do best, which is look after owners. So thank you so much to listen to actually mostly Pam talk today. So this is our is a QR code for our waitlist if you would like to be informed about the things that we are building currently, and we would love to hear any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. I really appreciate you running through all of that with us. I know there was a slight apprehension around being kind of the first people to share the information that you've been privy to. With regards to all the different features and services that you've outlined, is there a timeline for people to expect this to go live? I know you've got the wait list currently.
Yeah, so our newly rebranded, let me stop sharing my screen a second because it's making me feel dizzy. So our newly rebranded website is launching this week. We had a few development delays, which are always frustrating, but are just part and parcel of building something from scratch. But we have a functioning service comparison site now that we are launching imminently. With regards to the pet, sorry, I can't get my words out, the pet profiles, so the owner dashboards, we're hoping that they will launch over the summer, with beta testing prescription writing software in the autumn. That would be our sort of, correct me if I'm wrong, Pam.
I really, that's what Victor says.
That's what the boss says. That's what our CTO.
doable, but anything to do with tech, I think, remains open for debate. Once you actually start building it, there are always unforeseen troubles or things that cause you more of a headache. But we always liken what we're building to a house, and I really hope we're done with the foundations and the walls, and now we're just decorating the rooms is our hope. So we think all the back end architecture is up and running, and that's just a case of spinning up some lovely front ends for the different spokes of the platform.
And how do you see it sitting in the hands of independent vets? How would it physically be used by them in clinic?
Do you want to go, Em?
Yeah. So we're sort of two different ways we're thinking about it. So the first is via API. So essentially they'd be able to go to a portal, log in, and via API the information would be shared that enables them to generate a prescription and enables it to feed back to their PMS system. And the other option is a straight up integration with PMS systems, but that is logistically challenging given the number of different PMS systems that operate in the UK. So I think probably the route we will end up going down is the portal route. However, we are in conversations, aren't we, Ange, with a couple of the PMS system providers about integration, and if those conversations get up and running early enough, then I suspect there's no reason the two couldn't be developed in tandem, and then integration with further PMS systems down the line as and when they're ready to have those conversations.
Interestingly, the CMA did say that they wanted it to be a sort of a separate platform as opposed to being integrated, but we feel as vets to have it integrated would be a real benefit. So yeah, we don't know which way at the moment. We're sort of preparing for both.
Okay, yeah, interesting. How did it come about, the involvement with the CMA? Like how did all of this kind of materialize? Because it's been years in the years of conversations basically that have come to your involvement in it, right?
Absolutely. So I think, like Emma alluded to, Emma and I started thinking about building Petscribers back in 2021, and Em came to me and took me out for a drink. She's like, it was Em's idea, and she's like, I'd really love to build this, and there's a real gap for it, and we should do this. And I was like, hold that thought, I'm pregnant. And so 2 years later, Em and I finally got around to sort of building up wireframes and thinking about exactly how we wanted it to look like. And we took it to a UX lady who were like, stop right there, girls. To build this off the bat is going to be really, really expensive. And so we broke it down to the more logical steps that we have now, with the service comparison being the first one, and then progressing towards the final end product, which is the e-prescribing suite that we really, really wanted to build. But we've been really lucky in our investors and our advisors, and one of which is a wonderful economist, and we weren't even aware that we could respond to the CMA. So naively, we didn't realize what would they want to talk to little old Em and I pedaling in the Cotswolds for? We're just beavering away and building something that we quite like the look of. And then it turns out you realize that they're a group of generalists. They're people that know an awful lot about an awful lot of things, but actually they're really open to listening, and that's why it was so important that so many people responded to the current remedies, because actually they do take this information on board, and they took what Em and I were saying really, really seriously, and we feel that our value proposition was actually reflected in their remedies, which we were wholly unprepared for.
Yes, yeah, that's one way of putting it.
Yeah. So I think it came about because we had some really, really good advice. And so Em and I are very, very open to surrounding people that know stuff about stuff that we don't know. We know the problem inside out. We know as vets what we face. We know what our clients were facing, but we don't necessarily know how to put it together in the most commercial way, I think. And so we've literally surrounded ourselves with people that advise us really, really well on how to approach it from every which way.
Yeah, so it was a response to the CMA paper. It was a response to the February CMA paper that essentially had the CMA reach out to us via email and want to set up a meeting.
There's a question that's come through from Mark that says, who pays for this system?
Mark, I have spent many hours poring over various P&L models. I have lost hours of my life to Excel. It is, because it solves the problems for multiple stakeholders, it is funded by multiple stakeholders. So with the pharmacies that we are partnering with, for most of them, well, we're in partnership in affiliate revenue kickback schemes with them. So when owners continue through and buy medication off their website, we get a small kickback from the people that go through and purchase from them. We've then, the premium profiles for owners will be a subscription system. So people will pay to access that additional level of support with us. And then prescription writing software for vets will obviously be software as a service, much like many other software as a service things operate in the veterinary industry. And we are also in conversations with a couple of other people who are interested in forming relationships that would have a financial kickback to us. So there are a few different revenue streams pootling around in the background for us, actually. And we always felt that there wasn't one person who should bear the brunt for the system. And we always felt like it should be supported on multiple pillars because it provides a service to multiple different arms of the community. And so it should essentially be funded by the community. And that's sort of the way we approached it.
Wonderful. I've dropped the PetScribers link into the chat for anyone that wants to ping through and join the waitlist. I know you shared the QR code before. Mark's asked, clients won't pay for this, in his opinion. Therefore, his clinical view will be that internet pharmacies who pay the most will get the preference. What's your opinion on that?
Actually, we're unable to give preference to any online pharmacy under the VMR. So we can't offer, so like Google can, we cannot rank people based on how much they'll pay to get to the top of the search. And where we feel very strongly that they should be ordered by price or by whatever the client filters by, whether it's price, speed, or independence. So actually we're prohibited from letting the biggest boys pay the most money.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. So the link's there for anyone that wants to join the waiting list. Where's the best place for people to be able to reach out to talk to you more in depth about the CMA report and maybe ask you some more questions about the findings? Because I know from talking to a lot of people, there are still elements of the report that people would like some of the nuances explained or would like a little bit more information, which it would be great for them to be able to reach out and catch up with you. Where's best to find both of you?
Yeah, so probably either with the messaging system on the website, or they can reach out on LinkedIn directly, or I'll tell you what, I can put my email in the chat as well. More than happy to chat to anybody, but that's my LinkedIn handle. Or you can contact hello@PetScribers, and then Emma and I will be more than happy to chat to anybody that might have further questions about what we're building or what we're doing, or whether or not, the prescription writing software. Emma and I have a very strong idea in our head of what it's going to look like. Like we said, the back end is built up in a modular way, and so we're just building the front end associated with it. But if anybody has any strong feelings about how they'd like that to look or features that they'd like it to have, then we'd love to work in a really collaborative way with the community to build it.
And are you looking to hand it over to people to use it and break it for you and kind of help you?
Oh yeah, beta breakers are our favorite, so that'll be in the autumn.
Wonderful. I will do a review of today in tomorrow's LinkedIn newsletter as well. So all of the links will be dropped in there for everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate it. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Naomi. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us.
Introducing PetSap Wellness Plans. With a tap of a button, you can say hello to a 35% uplift in usage from your clients. In just 4 easy steps, your patients could be benefiting from your new PetSap Wellness Plan. Say goodbye to paper forms and unnecessary phone calls. Growing your wellness plan usage is now at the tip of your fingers. And you will also benefit from improving your clients' lifetime value through better retention. PetSap Wellness Plans by the numbers. 35% uplift in plan adoption. Get set up in minutes and even faster for your clients. And we don't charge any setup or renewal fees. It's time to start transforming your practice with Veterinary's leading wellness plan provider, PetsApp. Speak to a member of the pack to get started now.